Before we get started on your Saint report today, I just wanted to point out that when you go to Flipgrid, you'll see a place that you can click up there just below the mountain picture that says View 15 Topics, and that number will change from time to time. But that's how you get to the previous weeks. So you might want to go ahead and take a look at, click on that and see what you see. And then check and see, make sure that you've responded to all the different weeks, or that if you made a response that it remembered it and took it and all. But that's a way for you to view previous weeks, either to catch up, or if you just want to go back and look at something again, you can do that. So make sure you do that. Click on the View 15 Topics or whatever the number is. Hi, this is Ed, and your Saint report. You'll be selecting your saint name for confirmation, unless you've already done that. So you'll be also researching, if you haven't picked one yet, you'll be researching who you're going to do your report on and what name you're going to take. The format is pretty much the same as you do for school, in 2 pages. Make sure your name's on it, the date, and all that. You can email it to the address that's on here, confirmation@whitestonejournal.com, or you can save it in Google Drive or one of the other ones, OneDrive, and send me a link in in email. Whatever works best for you. If you want to do something else, let me know and we'll work it out. For the video, for your response, it's set to allow you up to 10 minutes. Use as much of it as you like, and don't just do it in a minute or two. And just go through it. You can certainly look at your report that you wrote, but it's nice to kind of fill things out, that you don't just read it when you do it. Say, for something you wrote in the report, you can explain it a little further, and it's easy to do on a video, and you don't have to write and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to give you some ideas on possible selections for your saint, and I thought that might be helpful. And maybe we'll start, I'll tell you a little bit about my saint that I took for my confirmation and why I took that saint, and maybe it'll give you some ideas just if I kind of explain it a little bit. So you know that I was baptized when I was 11. I chose it. I was nothing before that. And I chose St. John the Baptist. And I've kind of questioned this since then, because I've thought, why did I pick him when I'm really not like him in some ways? But the thing I liked about John the Baptist the most, and I probably should give you a rundown on what he was about, but the thing I liked about him the most was that he said what he was supposed to say. He did the thing he was supposed to do. And when Jesus came along, he gave it all to Jesus and just faded off, and of course got executed by Herod. But the point is that he didn't grab onto power. He didn't care about having power. He just wanted to do his job, what he was meant to do. And he got to see Jesus and know that it was Jesus before most people. I mean, Mary and Elizabeth and Joseph and Elizabeth's husband, they knew. But he was in a special place, and he's the bridge between the Old and the New Testament. He was the last of the Old Testament prophets, in a sense. Not that he was written about in the Old Testament, but he was the last one that his job was to point to Jesus. And I always just thought that was really cool. But I especially liked the way that he didn't hold on to power. When they said to him, oh, look, there's more disciples for Jesus now, and you're losing your disciples. And he's like, well, yeah, that's the way it should be. So it was a wonderful thing. Anyway, John the Baptist, for those that don't know, was cousin of Jesus. He was born first to Mary's cousin Elizabeth, and he announced Jesus was coming before Jesus was finally revealed, and Jesus came to him for baptism. John the Baptist was called that because he was baptizing people, not with Christian baptism like you and I have had, but just a baptism of water that signified repentance, that people were going out to him in the desert. He was a crazy guy. He was out there in the desert, living off what he could find in the desert, and was, not not a regular guy in a lot of ways. So it was very interesting. He pointed Jesus out. He had been preaching against the people that were in power, the king at the local area, not Caesar. had married his brother's wife, and there's a whole thing that goes along with that. But basically, that bugged Herod and Herod's new wife, Herodias. And so they eventually, she got her daughter to do a dance, and Herod liked the dance so much, he said, I'll do anything for you. I liked your dance so much. And she says, well, cut off John the Baptist's head. And so he had to do that. You can read more about him online. But that's kind of the thing. It was mostly that the one thing I liked about him was the fact that he didn't want to hold on to power. He didn't care about power. He just wanted to do his job. And that's kind of been my life in a lot of ways. So in that sense, I'm like him. I'm not like him in that he lived out in the desert and lived a very severe life. And I don't, fast and go out in the desert and I got married, I had children. I lived a very normal life in a lot of ways. So in that sense, I'm not like him. And I think about that sometimes, and I hope he isn't ashamed of me. So here's some other ideas for selecting your saint. So here's one trick for you is go to your favorite search engine and type in site:/www.catholic.org/saints space, and then type in whatever you want to search for. So I thought, I thought I'd see if there's any saints that have anything to do with bikes. And I found one. So I'll show you that in a moment. But the idea is just put whatever things you want, and it will limit the search to a list of the saint. This is a nice little trick to find one. So if you're looking for, saints that played, football or something like that, I don't know if there are any. But you could fool around with this a little bit and see. And that's one way to search for them. You could also search for things like martyr, young, old. You could search for a country name. Give me a saint in Peru. So it'd be site www.catholic.org/saints space Peru. And then you would find the saints from Peru more than likely. So it's not a perfect method, but something to try. All right, so when I put in that search, it came up with a lot of stuff. Sometimes it'll come up with ads, but I went down the page quite a bit, and then I found Alberto Marvelli. And it's because he rode a bike to carry donations to the poor. And also, during World War II, he rescued people that were being sent off to concentration camps. So he's an interesting saint. I didn't even know about him before until I did a search for bike. So I put a link for you to this site and just showed you what the name of it is, previous thing. So you can also do some searches. They have some things around there where you can say, what's the most popular names? You can just look through them all by their name. You can look for the ones that are women. You can look for the ones that, there's just a whole bunch of different ways to do it. But the idea is you can kind of search around, or you can use their search and just look up a specific name if there's one you're interested in. Also, I've put a playlist on the list of links, so I'll mark that. And in that playlist, it's just a bunch of YouTube videos on just random saints. And then I'm also going to give you a few that are special, like a special category. One of the special categories of saints are the doctors of the church. And these are folks that contributed to the church in some really incredible way. Most of them were intellectual giants, and I listened to a lot of lectures from universities. You'd be surprised how people talk about some of these. They really make a big deal out of them, and they're not even necessarily people that are Catholic. And then there's a few that are just kind of special. You can see St. Therese here, Lisieux. She was on that list earlier, and down toward the bottom. Anyway, it's one of the categories out there. I put the link in for you. And the idea is that she was really a very simple person in many ways, but she wrote so well about prayer that she actually pretty much killed a heresy without even really meaning to. And she didn't have to hurt anybody or anything else. All she did was have to write about her life with Jesus. And it was really amazing. So I very much, it's called The Story of a Soul. It's a book that you can get. Definitely recommended. But I mean, there's just a lot of variety in these folks. But the doctors of the church generally have very, very strong intellect for the most part. I'm watching this scroll down here, and that's true. Uh, some of them had kind of special gifts, and I'm going to cover some of those in a little bit more detail for you. Actually, if you don't mind, let me go ahead and tell you just a little bit more about Therese before we move on, and then there's a video on her in the playlist as well. So here's the big deal. At the time that Therese lived, which was, not much more than a century or something ago, there was a big thing where people were getting the idea that they shouldn't receive communion because they weren't worthy. And all of the focus was on that we aren't worthy and that we're horrible and everything. And the focus had moved away from God loving us to God judging us. And this was called Jansenism. It was a big deal, actually going back a century or so before that. It was started by people that were just really, really obsessed with becoming holy, but they really lost sight of what holiness really meant and the idea that it was a relationship with God that was not something just for the few. And they really got kind of crazy. You can look up Port Royal Sisters sometime and learn more about it, or Jansenism, if you'd like to look that up. That'd be a good thing to look up in heresies when we cover that part someday. Anyway, the point is that in her writing, she was like the opposite of a Jansenist. Her relationship with God was very loving. She didn't even worry about herself. She didn't judge herself. She just enjoyed being with God, and she told us that God enjoyed being with her. It was just a very loving relationship, and there's way too much to tell you here. But do look into her a little bit more, because really it's very, very beautiful. And in a sense, it cured the church of Jansenism. It cured the church of focusing on we're not worthy, we're horrible, and all that kind of stuff. And that's why she's a doctor of the church, is because, like a doctor, she cured us. So here's a few of the doctors of the church. Augustine's the first. And we've learned a little bit about him. And I'm going to put my plug in to consider taking Augustine as your name if you're really, really trying to understand life and you really, really care passionately about truth or anything else in his life that, appeals to you. If you struggle with lust and you'd want to be closer to God, but it's really difficult, that might be a good name for you. Anyway, he's amazing, and I've already told you how amazing he is, and I've been really, really doing a lot of studying about him lately, so that's the reason why I'm kind of plugging him here for you. So Ambrose is another doctor of the church. He's the one that baptized Augustine. He didn't write as much. Certainly nobody wrote as much as Augustine, pretty much, but he was a big influence on him, and changed the church forever in a way. The funny thing is, one of the greatest things he ever did was in answering Augustine's questions so that Augustine could go on to do what he did. Some people, if you're a person that really likes to help somebody that has more talent, that you feel they have more talent than you, and you want to help them to become great, Ambrose might be a good saint name. St. Jerome is actually known for not being all that pleasant of a person. He is a doctor of the church. He was a hermit. It makes you wonder if he maybe just didn't really like people very much. But he could be really difficult to deal with. And he and Augustine, like I said, they all kind of hang together, never met in person, but they wrote letters back and forth. And he was kind of rude to Augustine, but they would discuss things, and Jerome helped Augustine with some stuff. Augustine helped him. Anyway, the thing that's interesting about Jerome, he was the first person to translate the entire Bible into one language, New and Old Testament. And he was really good with language. And because he could read and write Hebrew and Greek, and of course Latin, he was able to go back. At the time, for the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, they were using Greek translations, but they weren't using the original Hebrew. He went back to the original Hebrew and then translated it forward into Latin. And he took the Greek that was in the New Testament. And if you ever want to see a copy of what that looks like, I have a book that's in Greek of the New Testament. And then he translated that into Latin. And that made it so that everybody everywhere that could read that could at least read Latin. At the time there were a lot of people that could read, but they couldn't really write. Anyway, it was possible for them to have it in a good quality translation into their language. So that's really what he's known for. And I mean, obviously, this was something that took him, like 15 or so years just to work on part of it. So it's a very, very big deal, a huge accomplishment. And he obviously loved God a lot to have made this kind of sacrifice just out there doing this all the time. But we all struggle with our tempers, and that doesn't mean that we can't be saints. So if you struggle with your temper, maybe Jerome is somebody you could imitate, in at least doing better. Or if you have a hard time getting down to what you need to do and doing really useful things, Jerome could be good because that's what he did. He really knew how to focus. All right, so Gregory the Great was a pope. He lived after the time of Augustine and a few others. And the cool thing about Gregory, I mean, he was major, but a couple of things you should know. One of the things is the calendar that we use every day. So when I'm saying it's November 15th and all that kind of stuff, that came from Gregory the Great. That pope was trying to solve the problem that the calendar was moving Easter around in weird ways. It was basically because they didn't have the days of the year worked out in a really scientific way. So he was able to use that to figure out exactly how to arrange the calendar so that everything would work right. So the calendar we use today is called the Gregorian calendar. You can look that up and verify it. You should always verify stuff that anybody tells you. By the way, Gregorian chant, which is, you'll hear it sometimes used at Mass. It's a particular kind of singing that's very early. That's named after Gregory the Great. The 7 deadly sins, which you may have heard of, you can look that up, Gregory the Great. But here's the interesting thing is, the thing that Gregory did was he took other people's good ideas and promoted them and helped them to happen. So there were people that had these really great ideas, but Gregory was the one that recognized it and then kind of helped them to get there. So a lot of the things that Augustine did, Ambrose, Jerome, all that, he really helped their ideas happen and changed the church strongly because of that. And in fact, changed the whole world. When they launch rockets to the moon or to Mars, they are using the Gregorian calendar. Okay, there's a reason I have to give you one more doctor of the church. Isidore of Sevilla. A couple of big things here. I mean, he did a lot of cool stuff. But one of the things that's really amazing is he pretty much was the first one to create an encyclopedia. Just a compendium, a collection of all the knowledge that was around and organized into a way where you could look things up. And that's a pretty major thing. If you've ever used an encyclopedia, St. Isidore's the one that came up with that idea and the way that he arranged it and everything. Of course, he did a ton of other really great things. Bear in mind, all these people were close to God. They all were. It isn't because of creating an encyclopedia or because their books are still read or anything else. It's because they changed the church in some way, and he did do a lot of really good things in that way. But in organizing all these ideas, it helped the church to educate people, and he was one of the first people in the church to really work toward educating everybody. And there's quite a few, and they're not all saints, but he was really the one that kind of set the pattern for a lot of it. Okay, there's another reason is St. Isidore could be a candidate for the patron saint of the internet because he arranged information in a way that was very much like Wiki. So when you're using Wiki, he would recognize that as something that, kind of fit with the idea that he had. But now I'm going to show you another saint that, is a good candidate for the internet too. So this is Carlo Acutis. He died at 15. He was ill and died, but he had done a lot to promote the faith on the internet. He volunteered to do web pages for his local priests. He's really a very ordinary life, a very ordinary holy life, but 15 years old. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to throw him in here. He's another candidate for patron saint of the internet, and rightly so. Maybe they'd make it both. I don't know. But I just thought you'd get a kick out of this. And this is another thought for you. He's a very new saint. He was just recently canonized. So you could take the name of Carlo Acutis, and that would be really interesting. It's important to remember that there's saints from pretty much every place all over the world. Don't just think Europe, but the United States, China, Japan, Korea. It's just everywhere. And they come from all kinds of different backgrounds. And some, came from families that were very powerful, some that were from families that were very, very poor, families where there was a good mother and father, families where there was not. Just any situation you can think of, there's a saint that was like it. Therese's parents were recently canonized. And that's really cool to imagine saints raising saints. Some of the other, like Isidore of Sevilla, his two brothers and his sister all became saints. It's really pretty amazing. So do think about it and think about what name you'd like to take. Do the research on the links that are down there. Look at the playlist that has a lot of the saint videos. And if you have any questions, do let me know. And all the best on your saint report. Thank you.